let's go to the SEC. 3 coaches on this list. 2 were on it last year, and they saved their jobs, and they're on it again because it's the SEC. It's hard. But Sam Pittman from Arkansas and Billy Napier from Florida, both on the list again. Let's start with Billy Napier. Let's start
Sam Pittman's just like in like purgatory. Like
he's probably forever in limbo. Yeah. Like if he and if
how does he get off of it? I feel like every year
win like 9 or 10.
No, but Sam Pittman just does quite enough to be on the hot seat the following year for like 9 years in a row now.
Yeah,
so,
you have to win like, but that's Arkansas.
Do you find that to be interesting? Like I don't know.
That's Arkansas. And Arkansas always has quirky buyouts. I mentioned with Brett Bielema that his buyout got me subpoenaed. This one for Sam Pittman. Basically, they owe him 50% of the remaining amount of the contract if his record from 2021 and beyond is below 500. They owe him 75% if his record from 2021 and beyond is above 500. So he is 24-21 since 2021.
Oh, geez.
So he would have to go 4-8 for that thing to drop to 50% of the remaining amount.
And that probably won't happen. They're pretty good.
So I think if Sam Pittman gets into a bowl game, they're going to, I mean, they have lots of money. Arkansas, you saw them go get Coach Cal in basketball. Like they got money.
Walmart money?
They do have Walmart money. They have Tyson Chicken money. They have
Tyson Chicken's legit.
Tyson Chicken is how they got John Calipari. So they can afford it if it's the 75% number. If they're 6-6, I think they probably do that because I think they're tired of being in that purgatory. But I just think it's a hard job. I don't know if I realize they put a lot of resources into the program. They have a lot of money. They spend a lot of money. And it's hard to understand that it's a hard job.
Yeah.
When you do that, you just want results. But that may just be where they're at. And then they may just want to get off the plateau. Billy Napier, very interesting situation. Very different situation. He saved his job this year. Now, when they said he was coming back, I didn't think he'd done enough to save his job. I was a little surprised. But I also understood that they didn't feel like any of the people they thought would be adequate replacements for Billy Napier would come. So that was your choice. Do you keep Billy Napier, which means you keep DJ Lagway at quarterback and give it another shot? Now, once they made that decision, which was right before the Texas game, at which they lost with a backup quarterback, they go beat LSU, they beat Ole Miss, they beat Florida State, they win the bowl game. All of a sudden, things look much sunnier because the Florida team that beat Ole Miss and LSU can play with anybody next year. They still have that tough schedule. It just flips. They have to go to Miami this year. But that team can beat anybody. The team that got its ass beat by Miami and Texas A&M can lose to everybody.
Yeah.
So who are they? If they are that team they were at the end of the year, Billy Napier is going to be fine.
Yeah.
It's going to be whether they make the playoff or
not. The question is whether or not you can be that team at the end of the year every game.
Yes.
Because they were that team this year at times. It's whether or not you can consistently play it.
Yeah, and I think, you go back to the Tennessee game. Like, had DJ Lagway started the Tennessee game, does Florida beat Tennessee?
Probably. Was that an overtime game?
It was an overtime game. So you've got that. The Georgia game. If DJ Lagway doesn't get hurt, Florida has a chance in that game. They had a chance in that game with Aiden Warner playing quarterback. Right. So that's the part I like. If you ask me, do I think Billy Napier gets fired at Florida or is still the coach at Florida in 2026? I think he's still the coach in 2026.
Oh, really? I think that the schedule makes it really difficult.
I think he's going to pull it off. But, and this is where people get mad that I'm putting him on the list, it's still really hard.
Yeah.
He's still got it. Like 7-5 probably won't be enough this time.
It's really hard to go 10-2 against the moderate schedule.
This is a very difficult schedule. I don't think he has to go 10-2.
You said playoff or bust a month ago.
I did. Yeah, I'm softening my stance on that. I think if you have Ole Miss's season from this year, where you're right there.
Yeah.
Because if you do that, it means Lagway's had a good year. And keeping Billy Napier means keeping DJ Lagway. Yes. And I think that's the important
thing. With Lagway is that he could be the one-man show if he takes a big sophomore step. Like that Billy Napier's entirely viewed entirely differently because he's got a phenom at quarterback.
Yeah.
Like that to me is always the ace up the sleeve. But I do think too that like being consistently the second half of the year, Florida, and then also performing well in all of the big games, they can't be blown out. I think that they need to. I think they need to be
They have to be competitive.
But
But
yeah,
I think
mean,
they
the path
can.
is there for sure.
I think they can.
For sure.
Which brings us to another guy that we talked about at the end of last year, Hugh Freeze at Auburn. If you look at our way too early top 25, we've got Auburn number 11. We think Hugh Freeze is going to be fine. We think Hugh Freeze is going to win enough games that it is not going to be an issue, and they're going to be better. A lot of the games that were close that they lost because of crippling turnovers, they're not going to commit those. They're going to win some of those, and it's going to be a much different situation in Auburn. The reason he's on the list is if you have a year anything close to this year, you're gone. Auburn is not in a situation with the massive buyout. By Auburn standards, it's very reasonable. They can pull the ripcord if they want.
Yeah, I mean, Auburn, I felt like was in a lot of games, but never had that like second half of the year like renaissance that Florida had. And like my hope for them, in terms of like the upside would be for them to have the Florida Renaissance beginning next year.
Right.
Like starting the year that way.
Yeah.
But if they go 6-6 again with the players they brought in and the investment they made, and you're wasting 2 years of Cam Coleman, you don't get anything out of the 3 quarterbacks you brought in. Like that's probably just like kind of like
I'm just going based on, okay, the roster's better. When you're terribly unlucky, things tend to bounce, find equilibrium, balance out. So which means you might get a little bit lucky. So if you have a better roster and you get a little bit lucky and you get better quarterback play, which you're going to have a 3-man competition with Jackson Arnold
right there
and Ashton Daniels and Deuce Knight, like you should be better. You should be out of the woods. I think they are.
They were good enough to win a lot of games they didn't win last year.
Right. So I
don't think it's as big of a step. Like we said on the last episode, they were the best bad team in the country last year.
Yeah. I think they get out of the woods. But I have to put Hugh Freeze on this list because if this season in 2025 is in any way reminiscent to the 2024 season, that they'll get rid of him. Yeah. Like, and he doesn't have a big upfront number on his buyout. Like it is equal installments till the end of the contract. It is just a line item at that point. Best daily fantasy game in America. Download the app. Use the code STAPLES. Play $5. Get $50 instantly. You got an almost free square in the Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes, if he throws for 0.5 yards, more than 0.5 yards, you're going to win that square. The way Prize Picks works is you pick at least 2 squares. The more you pick, the higher the potential payout. So, you grab that Patrick Mahomes square. You may want to grab the Saquon Barkley 112.5 rushing yards. That sounds like an enormous amount for an NFL game, but Saquon this year's been unbelievable. Like that's more than the Ashton Genty numbers in college this year.
No, it's not.
No, not more than he gained in those games, but more than his prize. That's true. His Prize Picks numbers were in the 130s and 140s. Yeah,
stands, which is
it's equivalent. It's basically the NFL equivalent to the Ashton Genty numbers.
But much like Ashton Genty, like Saquon feels like a home run threat every time he touches the ball in a way that NFL like
first play of the NFC Championship, first touch in the NFC Championship game.
I don't remember the NFL. I don't know, but like, did he like come close or set the record for most 50-yard plus touchdown runs this year? He broke so many like long 70-yard touchdowns this year. That's why we got to the rushing record.
I believe he had 0 60-plus yard touchdown runs in the NFL before this season,
and like 6 this year.
I think all of them are this year. Yeah. So it's fascinating to me. But lots of great Super Bowl squares on Prize Picks, and of course they got everything else: college basketball, the NBA, the NHL, you name it. Download the Prize Picks app. Use the code STAPLES when you sign up. And that's why there's one more name on this list in the SEC, and he's in the way too expensive to fire category. And if you're mad, Kentucky fans, I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. Mark Stoops is not going anywhere.
Best job in America.
Best job in America. They could have the same season they had last year, and unless he decides he wants to do something different or he wants to retire and wants to leave bajillions of dollars on the table, he's not going anywhere, and I'll tell you why. So I read through all 7 amendments to his contract and the original contract.
I'm going to put the mic down and just let you cook, pal.
Back in Amendment 3, which was signed in 2017, Kentucky agreed that the liquidated damages clause of the contract, which is what the school pays if they fire the coach without cause, 75% of the remaining amount of the contract due within 60 days of the notice of termination, the full amount. So the last person we saw with a buyout like this was Kevin Sumlin. Kevin Sumlin when he was at Texas A&M. And it actually did probably save his job for 2 to 3 years. because they didn't want to write just a massive, massive check. I think Kevin Summons might have been within 30 days, but it was
Finance the
huge.
buyout. I get it.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. You don't want to pay cash. You want to mortgage this. So, but Kentucky has agreed to pay cash, and this is where it's different than the John Calipari situation, where I said when they were trying to figure out what they were going to do with John Calipari. This is before he went to Arkansas, and ultimately Kentucky decided to keep him. But had they decided to get rid of him, it would have been a $34 million buyout. But it was equal installments every month through June 2029. That is a much easier number to handle than what Stoops would be, which I think would be about $37.5 million if it were after the 25 season. It was $44 million after the 24 season. Due within 60 days, like that, you are selling some barrels of bourbon to fund that sucker.
Yeah. The thing with Stoops is that it just kind of feels like from afar that the relationship and the desire and the passion and the happiness is gone. I don't know why, for them, but I still think that he's done a great job there.
Yeah,
I still
he's elevated the program.
Good.
Yeah,
like I don't know that he's a person that I wouldn't want to have running my program. It just didn't seem like he was as happy this past year for whatever reason. So I don't know if it's a crazy thing to say on a podcast, but that's just my perception of just his body language and stuff and the appearances that he's had. So,
I mean, when you're losing, it sucks and you're not happy. I think we might be reading too much into that, but everything. It is weird. Like the guy who was their offensive coordinator a couple of years ago, Liam Cohen. Now he was there for one really good season. Then he went to the Rams. Then he came back. Like Liam Cohen's a head coach in the NFL now.
Yeah, right.
That's crazy.
He did have a very awkward opening statement.
Yeah.
This past week, right? But yeah, no, for sure.
Did you like how I got that GM fired? Was that the opening statement?
I still don't know what that means, by the way.
It's the county that Jacksonville's in.
Oh,
Duval County. Duval. Yeah. So it's such a strange situation because we joke about Kentucky being the best job in the country because they will pay you ungodly amounts of money and not expect you to win national titles.
Yeah, just go win 8 games. You're a hero.
But
if they win 8 games next year, he's a hero again.
That's not enough.
Yeah.
It's not enough anymore.
Not enough to nothing. Yeah, not enough for what? What are you going to do about it?
But it's interesting because you look at Texas A&M, which paid $77 million to buy out Jimbo Fisher. They were going to hire Mark Stoops.
Yeah.
And then their board of regents rebelled because they looked at what they would have to guarantee Mark Stoops because Mark Stoops is already making about $9 million a year at Kentucky.
Yeah.
He's guaranteed all this money that we just talked about. Like you would have had to guarantee him exactly what you guaranteed Jimbo Fisher.
Yeah, and they didn't want to do that again.
Yeah.
And rightfully so. And also Texas A&M keeps coming up with crazy buyout stories, and I think they wanted to avoid that. And I actually think that rationality and functionality with the contract that they hired Mike Elko is probably a healthy thing to do to try to get the program on the right direction.
Well, I think a lot of programs should
off into an A&M conversation.
No, but a lot of programs should consider that. And it's like Kentucky, they're not in that position now. And I think, I don't know, you tell me. Because we've talked about this from the standpoint of sometimes it forces schools to give coaches time. And like the Billy Napier thing may ultimately work out in Florida's favor because part of the reason Billy Napier hasn't been fired yet was because last year it would have been $26 million, $13 million of it due up front. That's a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And when they weren't positively sure they had a replacement they wanted in hand, they were like, you know what? Let's try keeping him. We like the quarterback. The quarterback stays if he stays. And that may long-term work out. But the flip side of that is sometimes your buyout is so enormous that where's your motivation to fix it? And this is not just a Mark Stoops conversation. This is a Lincoln Riley conversation. This is a Luke Fickell conversation.
Well, you're not scared.
No, there's no fear whatsoever.
No fear. And sometimes fear is the greatest motivator.
Yeah. I mean, I'm afraid every day. Yeah. I don't know about you.
I mean, I'm not afraid every day. I feel pretty good about what we're doing, but I also realize that every time we get a win, that it's an important illustration of what we can do. And I think that's important.